Welcome to the Dr. Bergson's Best Health radio show. You know, they say that age is just a number, but mine is unlisted. The reason I say that is that I don't want to be judged by a set of numbers. I was just getting my nails done the other day, and the woman next to me was bemoaning that she's so old because she's 40. And those numbers, F4 and 0 to her, said so much that she was at the end of an era rather than the beginning of an era. Don't we all want to become the best that we can be and then be younger, longer? I was talking to a really dear friend of mine, Alan Gaby. He is one of the main figureheads in nutritional medicine. And I said, Alan, I'm feeling so good. I've been working out so much in the pandemic. I feel like I'm getting a six-pack. He said, I wish I had a six-pack like I had most of my life. Now it just looks like I drink six-packs. But we're all judged by our age, unless you live in Europe, and then I think it's not so harsh on you. But most of us are really judged by our age, and we think at 40 we're old, at 50, at 60, oh my God, life is over, and at 70 you're falling off a cliff. But if you've learned how to stay younger, longer, then those numbers don't mean anything. And you can make your morbidities, your illness, be in a much more compressed, if hardly at all, end of your life, and have an extended middle age most of your life. So on the show today, we have one of the true iconic figures in nutrition. She's often referred to as the first lady of nutrition. She's been a friend of mine, a sister of the mission as we speak, a colleague. And her latest book, which I just had to have her on the show to talk about slowing down aging, is Anne Louise Gittleman. Her latest book is Radical Aging, and she's here to tell you how aging can be malleable, and you can actually, like bubble gum, stretch it or condense it, but you have control over it, is the point. So welcome to the show, Dr. Anne.
And Dr. Bergson, it's a pleasure, my dear. You're looking 25 as usual.
Oh, God, and I didn't even have to pay her to say that. Thank you so much.
So true.
So tell me, you are really a person who walks her talk. So I would love to know, what are some of the really essential points? I think that you open your book on immunity, which of course is so pertinent because of COVID, but you said to really slow down the aging process, immunity is everything. Can you share that with us, please?
If we don't have our immunity, we have nothing. There's so many environmental assaults in this day and age. We've got to really protect ourselves between the virus, the variants, the bacteria, the parasites, the EMFs. Everything that's coming down the pike really depends upon a strong immune system. And probably number one of all the vitamins is hormone D, because it's not really a vitamin, it's a hormone. So I talk about the importance of hormone D, which is actually a prohormone. I talk about the importance of zinc. I talk about the importance of vitamin C, quercetin, and I talk about the importance of having a humidifier in the house to protect yourself against any kind of respiratory illness. So there's an awful lot of things that you can do. You can get tested appropriately. You can be in the optimally healthy range, not the sick range of most laboratory values, and you can adjust as you go on and you get better as you get older. I really think that the best days of our lives are ahead of us, because aging is a privilege, Dr. Bergson. It's a privilege that's denied to many of us and many of our friends that have left us far too early.
Oh, I totally agree. So there's several questions I have. In your book, you talk about how important it is to have vitamin C balanced. So how do we know if we have our vitamin C intake in a balanced manner?
One of the ways you can do that is through a vitamin C kind of challenge test. I personally take my vitamin C in a buffered amount. I take it in a buffered powder. I get 4 grams of C in one scoop, and I take 20 grams a day. My system can accommodate 20 grams of vitamin C at one fell swoop. There are people that can only accommodate 10 grams. I must have a very heavy metal overload, which I do with the mercury fillings that were in my mouth for 20 years and recently got rid of maybe 10 years ago, and there's still mercury in my tissues, which means that my body is still fighting off the heavy metals. So taking a challenge is probably the most important thing.
So how do we do a challenge with vitamin C?
So we start taking maybe 500 milligrams, up it maybe by another 500 milligrams every hour or so. And as soon as you have to run to the bathroom and to bowel tolerance, you'll know that that's the level that you can tolerate and go a little less.
So you take vitamin C in increments of 500 milligrams to the point where you get loose stools. At that point, you know that was a little bit beyond your bowel tolerance. And so then you go a little bit under. So if you got diarrhea at 20,000 milligrams,
and you go to 15,000.
Gotcha.
But I see that in this day and age that vitamin C is such an important collagen builder. Everybody talks about taking collagen. I find that vitamin C coupled with amino acids, lysine and proline, are very important for collagen building to prevent cancer from metastasizing through the body. So vitamin C is extremely important. It's the premier antioxidant and one of the most important anti-aging nutrients.
That is so interesting because I was just giving a talk on SIBO in Miami, and one of the products that I was talking about from the microbiome products, they have proline in there to help fight off pathogenic microbial life in your gut. So it's interesting that you bring it up. So how do you take proline?
I take 1,500 milligrams a day in addition to lysine at 1,500 milligrams a day, plus my 20 grams of vitamin C for collagen rebuilding. I do not do well with the powdered collagen. I don't think that that's very well absorbed, nor the liquid collagen. So I stagger that through the day, 500, 500, 500. Those are two very important amino acids that rebuild collagen and are very important for the cell wall. So we find that when people are very high in the proline and the lysine, they don't get sick, they don't get the flu, knock wood, they don't get virus, and they don't get the big C.
That's so interesting because so many people talk about the importance of a healthy cell wall, and they mainly focus on lipids and they focus on your essential fatty acids and having lipid flexibility. But I haven't heard people talk about collagen in that way. What else in the body besides, of course, our skin, our face, the world that the outer world sees us by? How else does collagen affect our health?
Well, I believe that cancer, which is something that we're all concerned about, because as we get older, the odds get riskier and higher and heavier and so forth. I believe that cancer is actually a collagen disease. So I think it's very important to have adequate vitamin C plus the proline and the lysine to help prevent cancer from spreading, because the problem with cancer is when it's not isolated, it becomes metastasized. And this is work that is not work that's identified by me necessarily, but by Mattathias Rath, who worked very closely with Linus Pauling many years ago. It's the Rath protocol to stop cancer from spreading.
So are you saying that if your cell walls have better integrity, then if a tumor does show up, it's contained? So collagen helps contain cancer so it won't allow it to travel? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I have not heard that before. That is fascinating. So can you just repeat that one more time so we know? And where do you get your collagen if we're wanting to embark on that kind of a program ourselves?
We get it from the vitamin C. That's why challenging yourself to bowel tolerance is so important. The vitamin C that I personally use is called Vitality C, that was created by a cancer survivor. And I'm very concerned about all this because I'm married to a 4-stage melanoma survivor. So he has lived on vitamin C for the past 20 years at 20 grams per shot.
Interesting. So does he take 20 grams once a day or does he take it several times a day?
He does what I do. We put it in a glass of water, maybe 16 ounces of water with 5 scoops of the Vitality C at 4 grams per scoop. So that's 20 grams at one shot. And he, like me, can tolerate a very heavy dosage of vitamin C.
That is so interesting. So you're also constantly, because when you're a person living on this planet, and the planet is toxic, every day we're accruing new toxicities that need to be cleaned out. So I guess that would, one, help your historic ones, like the remnants of the mercury from the amalgams.
For me.
For many of us, of course, many of us, but then also it will help reduce taking in the toxins that you're exposed to in the present day.
Exactly. And I think that the key here is it's not what you're exposed to, because we're constantly going to be assaulted by all kinds of toxins in the environment because we're living in an increasingly toxic world. It's the ability to excrete the toxins that's so key. And many of us just genetically don't have that ability with the MTHFR variants and so forth. I have 3 variants that are unusual in my MTHFR genetic coding. So for me, it's imperative to have high vitamin C. To me, it's the most important nutrient ever. And it's not just for me, it's for anybody that wants to prevent any kind of degenerative disease, autoimmune disease, and to prevent sagging, bagging, and dragging of the skin.
You have no sagging, bagging, or dragging, I must say. You look fantastic.
Well, it's very sweet, but I attribute everything to vitamin C. It's what goes on internally that's the key.
So the vitamin C facelift, that'll be the new thing.
Yeah, the bowel tolerance vitamin C facelift. Yes, very exciting. With the proline and the lysine. Don't forget the proline and the lysine.
So how do people figure out the perfect dose of proline and lysine for their individual physiology?
It's about 1,500 milligrams. From the research that I did, it's twice as much if, God forbid, you have cancer. It's like 3,000 of each per day if you have cancer, but for just maintenance, it's half that dosage.
So it's 1,500 milligrams of each. And do you take it with food, without food, once a day, twice a day? How do you do it?
I take it with food.
Okay, once a day or twice a day?
I take it 3 times a day, 500, 500, 500.
Oh, I see. Why do you separate it into 3 different times a day?
It's just easier for me to take it that way.
Okay. And also, when you're talking about vitamin D, I just gave a talk on it, and I learned something. You learn so much when you teach or when you write a book, right? You become,
Yes.
That's how you really own material, and then you can share it. I was wondering why some people are so at risk of such a severe response to COVID and others aren't. And it isn't just the level of vitamin D, it's the way that you eat your food affects the way your body can use vitamin D. So it turns out that high fructose corn syrup deactivates the activating enzymes that allow vitamin D to be activated.
Another reason to avoid it entirely.
Exactly. So that's so interesting. Boy, I just learned that. I'm going to start taking that too. I love that. And the next chapter that you have is about the advanced glycation end products, which interestingly enough, you write a book on aging, and the acronym for these are AGE. So what about the stop ages, not just stops aging, but these advanced glycation end products?
It's something I stumbled upon. When we write books, the right material from the universe is just placed in front of us. And I stumbled upon a book by Dr. Helen Blacera, who's a researcher at Rockefeller University. She's a diabetic researcher and found that the diabetes is caused by a high overload of advanced glycation end products, a naturally occurring. It's actually a toxin that's inherently found in certain foods, but more importantly, by the way we cook foods. And so she did research for 10, 20 years and found that certain foods that were broiling, grilling, frying, and air frying are very high in these advanced glycation end products and can enhance disease, enhance inflammation, enhance cross-linking of proteins, and tamp down the ability of certain genes to protect us. So it's a real toxin that we have to prevent, and you can do it by changing the way that you cook foods.
So a lot of people are getting into this air frying because it looks like it's healthier. So you're saying if you buy one of these air fryers,
use it occasionally.
Okay, use it occasionally. But if you use it on a regular basis, you're actually exposing your tissues to another toxin, not one that you're breathing in, but one that you're cooking. And by the manner at which you're cooking the food, it's producing a toxin. So you're taking in a food, but you're taking in an anti-food at the same time.
That's right, because high and dry is one of the ways in which you get the advanced glycation end products. You need to keep the heat very low. Wetter is better, and have food cook in its own juice, and maybe pop a load or in a convection oven. So that was a big aha moment.
What's an end pop a load? What was that?
In parchment.
Oh, in parchment paper. Okay, I didn't hear that. Okay.
You want to poach, you want to steam, you want to braise, you want to soup, you want to saute, but you don't want to use a lot of high and dry heat.
I'm in Texas right now, and everybody loves
the great state of Texas. Yay, Texas! I'm married to a Texan.
And I'm hoping to be married to a Texan. No, so I was just making a little joke. Those numbers turn some guys off. So, everybody here grills, and guys will say, oh, I love to cook. I love to cook. Well, what do you cook? Well, I grill, and they'll burn, char a steak, char shrimp, char. But this isn't an issue though with vegetables, right? It's just if you char the protein from protein foods, but you can char zucchini or an onion or a pepper and you don't get the advanced glycation end products. Well, or do you?
You do, but a much less amount. It's the animal foods that are inherently higher in advanced glycation end products, especially the animal foods that are proteinaceous and are also high in fat. So bacon is the highest of all of them.
And then so probably steak, if you're grilling a steak.
Well, you can prevent it from occurring if you marinate, which is one of the mantras in the book. So marination and all the marinades that I write about in the book are kind of a saving grace. And it will reduce something like 88% of the advanced glycation end products. So there's always a kind of workaround, so to speak. There's kind of a health hack that you can use that I write about in the book.
We love these health hacks. Can you give us one example of one of your favorite marinades that you might, let's say you're going to put a hamburger, it's the 4th of July, you're going to put it on the grill. How might you do it so you're reducing the advanced glycation end products?
I don't really marinate a hamburger, but I would marinate a steak. I'd get a 44 Farms, because you're in Texas. It's the best brand that I know, out of a grass-fed steak. And you need to marinate grass-fed anyhow to really reduce the toughness. And I would use something like some wine, some glyphosate-free wine, maybe a little lime juice, a lot of garlic. And then I would also put in a little bit of broth and maybe some thyme, which is very anti-ages, anti-advanced glycation end products, and some rosemary. That's what I would do.
Does rosmaric acid also reduce advanced glycation end products?
It does, but thyme does even more.
Thyme. So THYME, thyme, the herb, not just thyme, not the clock time, but the herb thyme.
It's time for some time. And the thymol is very good because it's anti-COVID. So you're getting many birds with one time.
So the polyphenolic compound in thyme also tends to be antiviral. And at the same time, it's anti-age. Ages. Remember, so ages stands for advanced glycation end product.
So that you don't age, because every aging process known to man has been connected to the overload of ages in the tissues. It affects the tissues, it affects the tendons, it affects the muscles, it affects the ligaments. It is a big thing that nobody talks about, Dr. Berkson.
I remember so I'm going to test you here. I remember I went to so Jeff Bland was teaching his very first course in nutritional biochemistry at the Naturopathic College, the National College of Naturopathic Medicine. And he was talking about one of these things that a lot of people have for breakfast that's fried in oil, that a lot of people love. And it isn't one of the biggest sources of ages too. Donuts.
Any yes, anything
Donuts.
Oh my God, donuts. Sausage can be the same way, though.
What could be the same way?
Sausage.
Okay, and why is so? Tell me what you think about consuming sausage.
Well, it's a high source of ages because of the way the meat is processed. Animal foods are naturally higher in ages to begin with, but when you fry it and use high heat, then you've got more ages that are produced.
Oh, I see. So when you're frying the sausage. Okay.
Yes. So the ketogenic diets are very high in advanced glycation end products. That's the take-home point here. The diet that people are using to keep themselves thin is making them older before their time.
Oh, then you're going to have to comment for me on the carnivore diet.
Oy vey. Is that a good comment?
Because I just had Rob Wolf on the show and I asked him his opinion on the carnivore diet. And he said there are some people living on it that seem to be thriving on it. So I wanted to ask you about your opinion.
I think that's probably true. And people thrive on keto and they thrive on macrobiotics. They thrive on juices. They thrive on a vegan style diet and so on and so forth. I think for short periods of time it's probably very healthful, but for long periods of maintenance and to be practical, I think it's a no-go.
Okay, very interesting. So is there any other way that we can be getting these very aging products? So it's a little confusing because every time you say aging, it is a little not easy to hear the term advanced glycation end product, the acronym AGE. So anything else that creates age inside our body?
The foods that are most high in ages, inherently high in ages, would be the animal products and the animal fat. So we're talking about a combination of a protein and fat, and that would be cheese. Most cheeses are sky high in ages. So we've got the cheeses, we've got the sausages, and we've got the bacon. Those are three things you should have very rarely.
Now, this is what's, food has become so confusing because you read one thing and then you read another thing. You hear this. I just heard that there was one of the largest studies ever done on how foods link to aging. And one of the foods they linked to the most long-term longevity were cheeses because of the probiotics in cheeses. But yet now you're saying cheeses are very high in ages. So
very high in ages, unless it is a lower fat cheese, unless it's a sheep milk cheese.
What about goat cheese?
Lower.
Oh, very interesting. What about the vegan cheeses? Have you heard of Voila cheese and diet cheese? Do those?
I think those are very, very satisfying. They're definitely good. Follow Your Heart is another brand that I like. They're made with coconut oil. They're very satisfying and get people off of the cheese habit. For me, the hardest thing of all to give up was cheese. I could give up high fructose corn syrup, sugar with no problem. Cheese was very difficult. This really allowed me to transition into a cheese-less diet so I could be ageless.
So in your opinion, to stay younger longer, you should reduce your cheese intake and your animal protein intake.
Yes, unless you use a lot of marination, unless you use a lot of herbs and a lot of benfotiamine, which is very anti-aging, AGEING.
So how do you take this nutraceutical, and tell us about it?
It is a fat-soluble B1, which is also good for neuropathy. I take 300 milligrams a day, and it's the only nutrient that I found in my research that can actually reduce the amount of ages and the buildup in the tissues.
This is so interesting. I just had Jonathan Rothschild on the show, and he has two companies, Ecological Formulations and Cardiovascular Research. And
I love those companies.
He makes lipothiamine.
Oh, I love it. What's the word I want to say? How apropos is the word? It's
so the universe is clicking together. It's like our plate tectonics are matching. And he was telling me that there's quite a number of doctors who specialize in improving cognitive decline and treating Alzheimer's disease that are using the lipid soluble form of B1 of thiamine, because it goes right into the cell membranes, the nerves, and the brain. Exactly. But I didn't know that it reduces the ages.
See, it's all connected. It's all very connected, very connected. And it's one of the ways in which you can overcome, and God willing, you can reverse Alzheimer's. It's one of the nutrients that I write about. It's a biggie. It's one of the up and comers.
Okay. So where do you get your lipid form of thiamine?
I don't get it in the lipid form itself. I get it in the benfotiamine form itself, which is lipid soluble.
So I guess they both would be doing the same thing. They both are what's called lipophilic. So they both can easily go into lipid membranes.
The blood-brain barrier, yes.
Okay. So there's a sacred bridge between the brain and the blood and the rest of the body. And it's called the BBB, the blood-brain barrier. And only so many things can go through there. And the more fat-soluble things can often have an easier kayaking trip into the brain from the blood.
It's a nice way of putting it, yes.
Because it's one of my favorite things to do. But boy, that I learned so much every time I talk with you. So some kind of lipid form of B1 should be on everybody's list to keep them younger longer. Is the bottom line. And
to avoid type 3 diabetes, which is now known as Alzheimer's.
Right. Because of dysinsulinism in the brain. The brain mainly eats oxygen and sugar. And when you have dysinsulinism or insulin resistance in the brain, it can't have any food. It's starving. And so you don't think as well.
That's correct. So there's insulin dysregulation.
Exactly. So is there any other way? So the main way to reduce ages, which appears to be very important, is to avoid cooking in a certain way that creates it, and certain foods that when you cook them creates it, using the lipid soluble form of B1. Anything else?
The only other nutrient that I found in my research was carnosine.
That is so interesting again, because we often recommend carnosine combined with zinc to upregulate adhesive proteins to bring enterocytes, that are the single cells that make the gut wall up, together. So they come together and open and come together and open like doors should, open and close when they should at appropriate times. And zinc carnosine helps the enterocytes do that. And I started suddenly doing a dive into carnosine and saw what an anti-aging substance it was. Can you tell us about it?
Anti-aging, it gets rid of brown spots. It gets rid of the lipofuscin on your hands. It gets rid of, it acts almost like a chelator to excess iron. And it's also important for soft tissue injury and damage. So it's a biggie when it comes to all this. It's one of my favorites.
So how do you take it and how much do you take?
500 milligrams twice a day.
So you must be like me. I have people come into my home and my kitchen counter is just covered with bottles. And at different times, I'm just taking lots of different things. And people go, how do you look and act and be like you are? And I go, oh, it's so involved.
I have a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday schedule.
Oh, so you only take supplements on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
No, I rotate every 3 days. I take this on Monday, this on Tuesday, this on Wednesday.
Oh, my. When did you start doing that? Was that something you did to track everything, or how did that evolve?
Because after I did Radical Longevity, there's so many vitamins I started taking, I had to start staggering them a little bit. So certain things I take daily. Vitamin C is one of them, the lysine is the other one, and of course proline for the collagen, and to prevent any kind of adverse condition from metastasizing through my system.
Do you take arginine?
No, I don't.
Okay, it was so interesting. I bumped into Susan Lark. Remember Susan Lark?
Oh, is Susan Lark still up and at 'em?
She's up and at 'em, but a while ago, she was a female physician specializing in female health in the Los Altos area. Incredible woman. And she had her mother with her. And her mother was in her 80s. And then her mother had next to her this really young guy that was in about his 30s. And I assumed it was Susan's brother. And then Susan introduced this young man as her mother's boyfriend.
Oh my gosh.
So I didn't want to say anything right in front of them. So I grabbed Susan harshly and pulled her into the bathroom and was like, what the heck? And she said, oh yeah, they've been together for years.
How sweet. How sweet.
I said, what's her secret? And she said, arginine. My mother takes lots and lots of arginine, which makes lots and lots of nitric oxide, and she swears by it. She takes a fair amount of arginine in the morning and at night. And so I always take nitric oxide boosters ever since Susan Lark's mother was able to be so successfully and peacefully with this much, much decades younger guy.
I love that. I've always stayed away from arginine because it's a kind of a trigger for virus.
Right. But so you have to balance your lysine with your arginine, right, to do that.
Yeah, and I take enough lysine. Here's to arginine.
Okay, here's to all the wonderful amino acids. So before we go on to the next, can you share with us a typical day of what you eat and how you work out and how you be as beautiful and young as you are while having tread on this planet with your footprint so long?
That's very kind of you. I get up in the morning. I get up at 6 in the morning. I live in Idaho and it's still kind of dark. So I get up at 6 and I take thyroid. I take 60 grains of thyroid, one grain, I guess it's 60 milligrams of thyroid, 1 grain. And then I take I have an adrenal formula that I take. I take adrenal and I take thyroid at the same time. And then I take something called a redox signaling molecules, which I write about in the book. And what else do I take in the morning? And then I take amino acids. I love amino acids. I take perfect amino in the morning, 5 of them first thing in the morning. And then I go and I look on the computer. And after I'm on the computer, I go upstairs and I work out for about a half an hour.
What's your workout?
I have what do they call them? An oscillating plate. It's a power plate.
Oh, okay. Those are fantastic.
So I shake, rattle, and roll, and then I'll put on some 70s music, and then I'm on my bike, and then I'm doing some weights, and I just prance around upstairs. I have a special workout room, and then I go and have breakfast. Breakfast is yesterday's dinner, either lunch or dinner. I do leftovers. I could eat anything for breakfast. I'm not a smoothie girl.
Excellent, excellent. So
I love to eat protein, fats, and carbohydrates.
So what then? What does your lunch and your dinner look like that end up later the next day being your breakfast?
Usually at night it'll be a stir fry. The other night we had a steak salad, so I had a steak salad for lunch, for breakfast this morning, actually, with a homemade dressing, homemade mayo, with a lot of it's my mother's secret sauce, and that would be horseradish. I love bitters, so I do a lot of bitters.
So what are some of the other ways you get bitters in?
Arugula, I do a lot of arugula. I do a lot of grapefruit. I make a grapefruit salad with a little bit of avocado and fennel. I have great recipes. I have a cook, so I'm very blessed. So I can think of these crazy combinations, and she'll actually implement it. I'm very fortunate.
Does she come over to do the cooking, or does she live there, or how does that work?
She doesn't live here. She comes 4 days a week. I make the menus out and she implements, and she's very talented. So a shout out to Teresa. She's wonderful. I wouldn't be here without her.
Yay, Teresa. Thank you so much for taking such good care of our First Lady of Nutrition. So is there so about how many vegetables do you get in a day, and how many do you think are important to keep you younger longer?
5 to 7 different varieties of every color in the rainbow, especially purple and red and yellow. I love all those vegetables. I have a huge salad, usually it's either lunch or dinner, whatever meal I'm able to get the salad in. And we do a green every single meal. So I do a lot of broccolini is my favorite.
Broccolini is my very favorite. And I just discovered last year, right before the pandemic, that it has the most minerals of any vegetable other than daikon radish that goes deep into the earth. Broccolini has much more minerals than even broccoli.
Oh, do I feel good about that? I'm going to continue eating it. We saute it with a little bit of olive oil and a lot of garlic. And I also use a little bit of macadamia nut oil because it's very solid. It's very, what shall I say? It has a high smoking point.
And it's very high in omega-7 fatty acid, which
for the skin.
It's fantastic for the skin, and it tamps down nasty pro-inflammatory cytokines. So that the macadamia nut oil is so anti-inflammatory, and of course, aging is
an
inflaming.
Exactly.
Right. So where do you get your macadamia nut oil, and how do you know that it's not oxidated? How do you buy the best?
I get it at not Whole Foods here. We have natural grocers. It's Allendale.
Allendale's macadamia nut oil. Okay, everybody, we have to try this. How does it taste? Does it taste a little bit like macadamia nut? It is
delicious. It's delicious. It's nutty. It's flavorful. It's aromatic. It's delicious. You'll say goodbye to olive oil for a little bit once you try mac nut oil. I adore it.
I'm excited to try this. I have never tried. I eat a lot of macadamia nuts ever since there was a randomized trial out of Mexico where they took people with ulcerative colitis, an inflammatory bowel disease condition, and they gave half of them an extract of powdered macadamia nuts and the other half got placebo. Ooh. And they were all on many medications to stop flares and immunosuppressives, et cetera. And the patients on the macadamia nut powder were able within 6 weeks to go off most of their meds. And they were able to show that the omega-7 fatty acid, which has got a very polysyllabic, like it's like I'm doing a little hip hop dance here kind of oil. And what it does is it tamps down the interleukins that are inflammatory. So it balances out your pro to anti-inflammatory cytokines, what nature put in macadamia nuts.
It is, if you're going to do any nut at all, it's mac nuts. That's the way to go. Because the other nuts that people are eating, half of them are rancid. They're high in polyunsaturated fatty acids and they're not refrigerated. I'm very against almond flour because I think half of it is rancid.
Oh, interesting. But people say they bemoan because now that nuts and seeds and everything are so trendy, it used to be that flax seeds, chia seeds, macadamia nuts weren't that expensive, but right now they are. So can you talk to people, because some of them are going to complain about that?
Well, I'm not sure what I can, because I can't quite control that. I can just say that if you're going to do any nut at all, mac nuts, the healthiest nut because of the omega-7, the collagen connection, because it's so healing for the gut. That would be number one. Number two, the other best nut would be none other than pumpkin seeds because of the zinc factor.
I keep a bottle of raw pumpkin seeds, and after almost every meal, I just take a big tablespoon out and enjoy it. And every once in a while, I'll put the tablespoon in either a little bit of maple syrup or a little bit of organic local honey, and then I'll stick it in the pumpkin seeds, and that's like a dessert. So you get a little sweet with the seed.
It's delicious. I put it in my salads. We lightly toast. We don't roast, but we toast.
Oh, I like all these things that you have. It makes it.
I have no idea where it's coming from, but we do lightly toasting, and I put it, and I make a puree out of it as well because it's so anti-parasitic. So I'm very fond of that.
Yeah. So if I have opened up a membership during the pandemic because I had 22 lectures set up for the year and they were all canceled. And so people can join my membership. If you go to drlindseyberkson.com/membership, you can find out about it. If you go right to that, drlindseyberkson.com/membership, you can read about it. And in my membership, what I think I'm going to do right now is I'm going to gift everybody my favorite macadamia nut recipe, which is a chocolate pudding that tastes so good, you're sure you're in a French restaurant, and this is a 5-star chocolate pudding, and it's made with, in fact, I think I gave you that recipe once for one of your books.
I think you did. I think
did.
You did. And I've got to locate it again. Wow.
That is the best recipe. It is so easy to make, takes a few minutes in a Vitamix. And I'm going to put that and make it available to everyone at all levels in my membership because you just reminded me how amazing macadamia nuts are. And I'm going to recommend macadamia nut oil. We're all going to try it together because I've never tried that yet.
It's delicious. May I give you another tip that I learned from doing the research in the book?
Yeah, if you do, I'm going to send you something special too.
Oh, well, thank you. But you don't have to do that. I want to gift you with this. This is something that we just discovered. I don't like the almond flour. I don't like the coconut flour, high in oxalates, and I think some of the almonds are rancid. But I did discover chestnut flour. You will thank me for chestnut flour. It is so delightful and so aromatic and so gourmet-ish that it is light and fluffy and tasty and very, very healthful.
So where do you get this and what company makes it?
Online. It's a company called Bulk Ease, E-E-Z-E, Bulk Ease.
And do you just cook with it like you cook with any other flour? Like you can make pancakes with it or make a muffin mix with it?
Yes, and crust. It's the best crust.
Oh, that is so, lately I've been going over to Naples to work 1 week a month and staying with this scientist friend who loves to cook and his sons love to cook. They're all PhDs and they're chemists and they like to take that knowledge in that of recipe type thing that you do in the laboratory and put it in the kitchen. And he's been teaching me how to make my own chapati-like flour out of chickpea flour.
Yes, I love that too. But this is a sweet flour. This you use for desserts, and it's very healthy.
Desserts, okay.
Because it's a complex carbohydrate, very healing for the gut. It feeds the microbiome. It's the best thing I found.
Does it have resistant starch in it like potatoes do?
I will say that it does.
Well, if the First Lady of Nutrition says that it does, I'm going to have to look into that. But boy, I'm excited to learn all these new things to cook with because these are things to keep you younger longer. And we're learning it from her lips to God's ears. So the next chapter wait, before I go to that. So what was one of your favorite dinners that you made in the last few days? I just want to get one more clear idea of how you eat because you're the queen of eating.
So we had a homemade pizza. And we used the cauliflower, the ground up cauliflower. I made a cauliflower crust, and we used a little bit of turkey bacon because we cheat every now and again, very rarely, but we do that with a lot of garlic and a homemade pesto that used that follow your heart cheese.
Interesting. Do you have a cookbook out that has pictures of how you make all your foods? Meals?
No, but there's a lot of recipes in Radical Longevity.
Excellent. Hold it up. Let's see the cover there. Radical Longevity. I love that. So, it's radical means health hacking, you just said. So learning how to health hack to stay healthy. You don't want to be older and be in a wheelchair in a nursing home in a hall and disabled. And so people all are scared to death about aging because they all view aging as being frail. But that's not the aging we're talking about.
No, we're preserving our health span and our youth span with strong muscles and strong joints and strong ligaments and a strong heart and a very sharp brain. And I tell you how to do all those things with all these health hacks that I've learned from being on the planet for so long, practicing for 40 years and studying with a woman that died at 106. My mentor died at 106.
Who was that?
Dr. Hazel Parcells, the grand dame. That was Susan Lark's teacher.
That was Susan Lark's teacher. Oh, Dr. Hazel Parcells, you're pulling names, blasts out of the past.
Way out of the past.
Oh, boy, we've all been around for so long, and it's fun to see this whole field grow up and evolve, right?
And come round, circle around.
But I love to see when someone is living well and really doing well, because every now and then, one of our colleagues will suddenly die in a way that just seems so unfair and not in sync with the way they're living. So you have no control over what tomorrow holds, but with the way that you live, you can give yourself the best chances ever.
You can defy the odds.
Defy the odds. I love that. So the next chapter in your book is about how to stop the toxic overload.
And that's where we take you through all the toxins from the heavy metals. I'm concerned about cadmium, which is a very toxic metal that we're now knowing is more toxic than any other the metals combined. We talk about EMFs in that chapter. Parasites, my favorite topic of all time, as well as mold.
Why is that your favorite topic?
Because when I studied with Dr. Parcells, she looked at the class and said, 8 out of 10 of you have worms. You got to do my worm diet. And we all dewormed in the 1970s. And I took back her worm diet, and my hometown of West Hartford, Connecticut has never been the same since. Everybody that I knew was on her detoxification anti-worm diet. We were doing the goat milk fast for 8 days.
Is that so? The anti-worm diet is a goat milk fast. So is that what it is?
That's what she taught. Yes, it was a goat milk fast where you take herbs and milk for just 8 days. The milks acted as worm bait, and then you zap the parasites with the herbs. It was extraordinary. My life changed after I dewormed.
In what way?
I had hypoglycemia. My skin was breaking out. I had adult acne, and then everything went away after the 8 days of the deworming. So everybody should go on this at least once or twice a year.
You know, the old-time anti-aging doctors would always say that as you're on the planet longer, we have stealth infections that occur. We have pathogenic microbes in us that we don't even know what they are. We know some of them. We have names: Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, but they're viruses and fungi. We don't even have names for some of these things. So they often used to say we need to do something about it. And they'd recommend things like 100 milligrams of doxycycline, a real low level every day, or being dewormed on some kind of deworming program several times a year. And the old guys that were just really smart, they would all say that that's a good part of staying healthier longer because we do accrue these things.
Yes, we're like toxic waste dumps the longer we're on the planet, so you have to detoxify. It's not the fact that you're holding all these toxins, it's the fact you're not excreting them. As long as they're going in and out, that's what the important thing is. We want to make sure they're escorted out as naturally and as safely as possible.
And these pathogens can compete with us for our nutrients.
Well, the worms do. The hookworms do. The ropeworms do. The amoebas do. The giardia does.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
And I wanted to say that the little threadworms do too, the pinworms that are so part and parcel of every kid that has ADD and ADHD, and all the kids that have pandas and PAMs these days, I think are all terribly wormy.
That is so interesting that you say that. So I was working at the Wiseman Family Practice Clinic, and Selma, who now heads it, who's a nurse practitioner and has become one of my dear friends, had this amazing patient that would come in with this young son that was very well behaved and wonderful. And the next year, the son came in and was a nightmare, looked like a little boy with ADHD and couldn't be controlled. He put a hole in the wall, put marks on the walls. And so Selma recommended that diatomaceous earth, told the mom just to give a tablespoon of diatomaceous earth with water once a day to deworm. And the mother did that for a month and a half, and that was it. The boy went back to being totally normal.
Yes, because when you have parasites or worms, especially the pinworms, and you take an EEG of the brain, it looks as if the child has a brain tumor. But if they have worms, you see the same EEG. So in other words, having the parasites is very neurotoxic.
This explains a lot. So when I had COVID a few months ago, I tripled up on my nutrients, but I also did the ivermectin protocol.
Good for you. Good for you.
And people say, how are you doing? And ever since the ivermectin protocol, Anne, I tell people I feel like I could leap tall buildings in a single bound. I have such supreme health ever since I had COVID, and I think I must have had parasites or worms.
So it was a blessing in disguise.
My COVID was a blessing in disguise. And I really do think that if you treat it in that way, or, I'm suggesting, it looks like the patients that are treated by my colleagues and myself with these kind of interventions, they're not being subjected to long haul COVID.
I would agree wholeheartedly.
Oh, it's so interesting. So, any other tricks for getting rid of endocrine disrupting pollutants?
That's a tough one because so many of them are oil soluble and so forth. I would say that if you up your soluble fiber, you're in a good place. I really like good old fashioned psyllium husks.
Excellent. So do you take that a few times a week, or how do you take that in?
I take bile salts and psyllium husks. I take 1 teaspoon maybe 3 times a week in a cran water cocktail that I make.
So you do a little what kind of bile salts? Where do you get it?
At UniKeyHealth.com, the company that I represent.
How do you spell that?
Unikey, UNIKEYHEALTH, UniKeyHealth.com. We have a bile builder that helps to supplant the missing bile salts. It also helps to detoxify and lubricate the gut.
Well, bile is an antimicrobial. It really helps get rid of a lot of pathogens.
A lot of crap, excuse my French. And also gets rid of heavy metals and hormones, recycled hormones.
So what do people do with this protocol if they've had their gallbladder removed?
They use Bile Builder. Okay,
so Bile Builder is that powder.
Not a powder, it's pills.
It's pills. Oh, so I'm confused. So walk me through this again.
I use psyllium husk, a teaspoon of psyllium husk 3 times a week. And then I use Bile Builder on a daily basis.
Okay, and how much do you take of that?
2-3 times a day.
2-3 times a day. Okay, so you really want to get a lot of that in.
I want to get it out because I want those recycled hormones out. I want the recycled bile out of my system, and I want the recycled heavy metals out of the system. And it also is the best natural laxative known to man. I just discovered that.
So the Bile Builder by Unikey is one of the ways you get rid of the toxic overload. And you've just discovered for people with intractable constipation, this might be something they should try.
It's very lubricating for the gut. Lubricates the gut. Yes, it was a wonderful side effect.
Oh, that's so interesting. I have noticed I work a lot with breast cancer patients. And when we go through their history, it's amazing to me how many of them can say, maybe not in their present situation, but a big hunk of their life, they were constipated.
Interesting.
And I'm convinced that if you haven't been cleaning out for a number of years, even if it's in your past, that puts a big stress on you. So transit time, healthy transit time is enormous for health.
And nobody talks about that the way they did in I guess it was back in the 80s.
The 80s, they used to say, the larger the poop, the smaller the hospital.
Oh, what a good, can I quote you on that?
Yes, you can. I think I got that from somebody else, but yes, it's a great quote because, there's something else that's a big important thing. If you don't mind me chatting for a second here, it's nice that we have this conversation, that we get a chance to talk with each other.
And we're on the same wavelength.
I know. I love that. We really, right before the show, we talked about how we were mission sisters. We really are. It's really true. But one of the ways the gut stays healthy is it cleans itself out. And it not just by feces moving through it. There's something called the motor migrating complex, which is an electrical mechanical motion that washes everything through. It's like the big truck that comes on the ice skating rink. a few times a day or evening and wipes all the slush out so that the ice surface stays smooth.
Love it.
And the only way, this motor migrating complex is so important, but you have to not eat for a few hours for it to happen. It only starts about an hour after you haven't had any food. And then it goes on for 2 or 3 hours only if you're not eating. And in our snack-oriented society, where people are eating all the time, you never have motor migrating complex. And then your mothership, of course, is your gut, and your gut can never really quite be healthy, no matter how many green drinks you drink or supplements you take, because your motor migrating complex doesn't get to do its gig.
That's why intermittent fasting is helpful for many people.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point too. They say, I guess, that if you fast for about 4 days straight, 4 to 5 days, the autophagic processes really kick in. And I think part of that is that the motor migrating complex gets to go on roids, and it just really does this incredible
cleanup job.
Boy, we're pulling all the dots
stops
together.
Off.
So the next interesting chapter that you have in your book is called Free Up Your Fascia. Can you tell us what fascia is and what do you mean by freeing it up?
Well, I think people get frozen fascia, which is a kind of connective tissue that surrounds your tissues, your organs, your tendons, your ligaments, your muscles, and it can get very stuck together because of the repetitive motion. The way that I'm going back and forth here is the repetitive motion through texting, through lack of the proper exercise, through lack of massage, through infection, through accidents, through all kinds of issues that are traumatic to the body. So you have to get moving. It's really movement. It's stretching. It's also massage that you need to do on a daily basis, or at least on a weekly basis. And it's also important that you take a lot of hyaluronic acid, which can free up the stuck fascia. So that's one of the nutrients that's anti-aging.
So let's break this down just a little bit. Where do you get the hyaluronic acid? How much do you take? So tell us more about that.
The brand that I like is a liquid brand called hyaluronic acid by Baxyl, Baxyl, Baxyl. I take 2 teaspoons. You start with about 2 teaspoons for the first week and then a teaspoon thereafter. And it will lubricate the fascia and it lubricates the system.
You take it every day?
2 teaspoons every day for a week and then 1 teaspoon per day for thereafter.
Okay, gotcha. Is that with food or without food?
I do it without food. And
why is that?
Because I don't like it with food.
Well, there you go. Okay, so does it have a flavor to it? Is that why you don't like it with food?
I just down the hatch.
Okay, and so when you say stretching, do you add this with your workout in the morning, or you do separate stretching?
No, I do Pilates. That's how I stretch.
Okay. And you said massage. So do you get massage from somebody else, or do you have a specific self-massage?
No, I get a massage therapist.
Okay. So how often do you do that?
Not often enough.
That's an honest answer. Now, I think I want an in-house masseuse. That's what I want. That sounds better than an in-house cook if you're going to have to choose.
Well, we have an in-house colonic machine. How do you like that?
I like that. You're clean. So how often do you do a colonic?
Probably once every 2 months.
Oh, so do you do it yourself, or do you have someone else operate it? How does that work?
No, it's a do-it-yourself machine. The people are out of Austin.
Oh, right where I live. What's the name of the company?
Angel of Waters.
Oh, what a great name that is. Okay, so the whole idea is you're constantly cleaning out, which is your mantra, to constantly be excreting, whether it's the waste products of the nutrients or the toxins we used to be exposed to or exposed to today. You want in and out, in and out, in and out with no gridlock traffic.
We don't want gridlock. No gridlock at any cost.
And gridlock eventually catches up with you. So if you're not having 2 bowel movements a day, and if you're not really cleaning out, if you're not stretching, it catches up with you. And then if people say, oh, macadamia nuts are expensive, you're going to pay more on the other end than paying.
literally and figuratively.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you know why? And this is my last lesson as we end up our conversation. The body remembers when. The body never forgets. It's like the childhood trauma that the body never forgets. There's an imprint that's made on the system, and the body remembers when. Even if you don't, the body has a memory, has a consciousness. The issues are in the tissues.
So tell me why you were just bringing that up. I'm a little bit connected with what we were saying.
Because we were talking about cleaning out.
Okay, got it.
And so you've got to clean. So there's an emotional how do we say this? There's an emotional aspect to this as well. Because a lot of times traumatic experiences can be held in the tissues. And if you don't clean out, especially with the colonics, it's still held in the tissues. It's held in the colon. It's held in the organs. And we want to just release it as much as we can. And sometimes you have to do that physically before it releases emotionally.
So body, mind, and spirit, if you release and have good release physically, it does reflect and improve your mental state.
I think you have to do it physically first to go into the mental. I don't think the mental comes first. I think it's physical. Because if you're not feeling good, then you're going to not release anything.
Very, very interesting. Another thing about that is that, like with the stretching that you were just referring to, the fascial stretching, a study came out just a little bit ago that stretching increases circulation, similar to even lifting weights a little bit. So every single thing you do adds up.
Yes.
And it's like a perfect storm. So instead of a perfect storm causing a bad situation, what you're describing in your book and all the steps and the many things to do, you're creating a perfect storm for the best outcome and the best situation. And I just want to get to 2 other little points, and we're almost done here. You said the mind gut. I know you have some other chapters too, but your last chapter is the mind gut. And I wanted to just finish with that because that was such a great title of that chapter.
Well, because the neurotransmitters are made in the gut, people forget that. And that's why it has to be clean. That's why you have to have the proper neurotransmitter precursors. So that has to be clean at any cost. And I think a lot of people are lacking in prebiotics these days.
And what are your favorite prebiotics?
My favorite prebiotic is whey, if you can tolerate it, and jicama.
And how do you eat your jicama and your whey?
The whey I put in a smoothie if I have a smoothie now and again, or I make whey pancakes most of the time.
How do you do that?
I have my cook makes me whey pancakes.
We don't have a cook.
You're asking the wrong. It's in the book. It's in the book.
Okay, it's in the book. In Radical Longevity, we have the whey pancake recipes.
I think you have we call it a whey crepe.
Oh, the whey crepe. It's kind of fancy.
You can have that, and you can wrap it around fruit. It's delicious, and the jicama is just delicious. And
how do you make that?
Well, I do this myself. I actually I cut the jicama and I have it with a little bit of cayenne and a little bit of lime juice.
Oh, I'm one of the few people on the planet that does not like jicama. It's not my thing. I don't know what it is.
I loved it when I was working at the Pritikin Center in Santa Monica, California in the 1980s, and I haven't gotten over it since. I adore it.
Oh, good. Do you make the little tortillas out of it?
No.
Have you seen, they sell them now at Whole Foods. They sell jicama tortillas.
Oh, I've seen those. Yeah, I like the chickpea ones better.
Okay, but there's all kinds of alternatives to gluten. There's all kinds of new ways. And of course, the more diverse your diet, the more diverse your biome, and the healthier everything works with each other.
Exactly.
So it's been wonderful having you on the show. There have been a million pearls to help us learn how to string them all together and wear the real healthy jewelry, the most healthy jewelry, which is to have the best days without pain and suffering, and to be able to look forward to the future. So thank you for writing a book that helps us be inspired to, and I love hearing about an anti-aging book from someone who's lived well. I don't like reading them from someone who's 20 years old and saying, this is how you stay younger, longer. And they really haven't lived through those decades. And you really have done such a beautiful job of it. So thank you for taking the time to write the book and then to have your son Stuart reach out to me and be on the show. I just love hanging out with you.
You're such a doll. We've got to get together. You come and visit me in Idaho.
Okay, I just travel so much for work now.
I'm going to come and visit you in Austin.
You're going to have to come and visit me. I think that's the way we're going to pull it off. You know, when I go to Naples 1 week a month, and then I lecture somewhere else. And then for this little bit of time that I come home, I don't even want to get in the car to go to Whole Foods. I just want to stay home. So I'm going to lure you to come over here, and we'll go into a steam room together and we'll do our exercise, and we'll cook. I'll cook for you. How about that?
And I'll be there enjoying every moment of it.
Okay, well, I hope this book does really, really well. There's so much good information, and we as a country are so ill. We need these kind of books. So
well,
everybody, Radical Aging by the First Lady of Nutrition, Anne Louise Gittleman. She is really the real deal, and I hope you've enjoyed this time together with us as I have with her and with all of you. Blessings, everybody. Bye-bye.